Great. Okay. Welcome to Technical Careers in Japan, 2022 market recap and predictions for 2023 with our technical team leader, Uros Cavic. Did I say that right?
That's good.
I think I've asked Milos that every time I've been on camera or on podcast with him. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Do you want to intro yourself a little bit to our audience?
Yeah, my name is Uros Cavic. That's the proper way to pronounce it. I'm 36 years old. I come from Serbia. I'm single. No, I'm not. But anyway, I've been in Japan for 4 years and I've been working for Wahl+Case as a technical consultant, mostly for engineering positions. And I became a team leader early in 2022. So I'm here to help with anything I can.
Perfect. Yeah, so today we wanted to go through a few different topics. Similar to the format we went through with Milos for the commercial positions. This is Milos's brother, actually, Uros. So that's a fun fact for big fans of Wahl+Case. So the first section will be about tech layoffs, how they played out in Japan for the technical roles for English speakers and native Japanese speakers. Then we'll go into hiring trends, open positions, salary ranges, and then the working culture. And so just to get things started, I wanted to focus on the tech layoffs that happened late last year, and there's kind of another rumored round of layoffs that will be hitting companies like Amazon in the coming months. And I wanted to get your thoughts, Uros, on how this played out in Japan. What were some of the things that you saw with the candidates and the clients that you were working with? And then also, what is the potential that this will carry over into 2023? So whatever your experience was.
What I would say about this, the situation right now in end of 2022, beginning of 2023, kind of resembles the beginning of pandemic, where a lot of companies were uncertain what's gonna happen, and back then I think actually beginning of pandemic was easier. The effect of letting go of people were less than right now. Right now, a lot of big companies, a lot of big players, the ones that you mentioned, some of them, are letting go of people across the world, in Japan as well. But that's affecting more, I would say, English speakers, because a lot of companies that are coming from abroad, bringing capital from abroad to Japan, are going back to their headquarters, pulling off mostly. So they have to cut costs. And I've seen a lot of multilingual, bilingual candidates actually being let go, whereas those ones that are even in the smaller companies, assumably less financially secure companies, are more secure than of those people that were working in the bigger companies right now, especially if the companies are here in Japan, founded in Japan.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting point, and something that I think echoes what Milos was saying. A lot of those international companies that maybe were looking at Japan as an expansion versus a core part of their business, those are the people who we've seen maybe affected the most on the commercial side as well.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that there have been a lot of English speakers who are affected there versus maybe like a more native Japanese domestic base. Do you see in the future that maybe turning around, or do you see that trend kind of continuing? I guess from your perspective, what's the outlook maybe for foreign engineers coming into Japan?
I think this kind of just started. So my assumption is that this trend will continue. There will be more and more jobs, more and more companies are already looking for Japanese speakers. At least they have N3 level speaking, especially for engineering positions. Of course, there are still more companies, and I'm talking about Japanese founded companies that have international environment. They're still hiring for English speakers mainly, but there are not many companies like those on the market. So yes, I would suggest people to actually learn Japanese.
That's great. I think it's interesting that you say that too, because I think from the perspective of potentially moving here, I think there's been kind of a myth, like everybody always said, like you do have to learn Japanese, you do have to learn Japanese, but for a long time I felt like people kind of treated it as like, oh, well, if you know how to code or if you're a strong engineer, and it is probably still true that if you're a strong enough engineer, you can find a job pretty much anywhere, but that there is that barrier, and maybe it's being taken a little bit more seriously now.
Yeah, I agree. But even if you're a very strong engineer, yes, you will be able to find a job. But to what cost? Like, a lot of people will have to actually take pay cuts from what they were earning in those bigger companies that they were let go of from.
Right, that's a good point. Let's come back to that when we talk about the salary ranges. Moving into kind of the hiring trends that you've seen throughout 2022, and you can even do maybe a comparison between the beginning of the year to the end of the year, and then potentially what you see as being the trends moving forward. Just like in-demand skills or like broad strokes, industries that you've seen
Sure.
maybe come up.
I would compare this actually again with the beginning of pandemic. So what I noticed back then, and it's happening again right now, so just confirms that theory that, for example, for engineers, more companies are focusing on back-end engineers right now. So when the market is stable, more companies are open to practically everything and very much front-end oriented, user interface oriented. But when it comes to the crisis, they just need their products to function well. So they're more focusing on the back end, on the functionality of the product. So that's what I've been seeing. That's the change that I've seen actually happening. And yes, exactly. Right now, as you know, we have a couple of teams, different teams that are covering different positions, and for that reason, we actually started merging so we can cover more and help more companies to hire actually on the back end side as well.
That's super interesting. And so you mentioned that functionality and then building out those products to be like more functional and
stable.
Yeah. Are there any particular industries that you see as being like kind of a go-to as far as like the products that are being developed?
Well, yeah, there are like industries like payment industries that you have like learning management systems, online learning, gaming companies. Yeah, I think those industries are going to be very strong within the next year.
Great. Okay. That's awesome. And then so as far as like that change that we were kind of talking about at the top with the layoffs happening, these global companies potentially pulling out of Japan, what have you seen maybe, what were the expectations at the beginning of 2022, and then compared to how it closed out, like what were the differences there that you saw in like maybe the clients you were working with, but also the...
Well, yeah, that goes again back to pandemic time, right? During pandemic time, companies were afraid actually to hire people. So then they started, afterwards they saw, because the market is lacking with candidates, right? With people who are able to do the job. They realized without the people, what they will not be able to do to sustain their businesses. So they hired and started hiring even more than they are supposed to, because they thought the market is going to go back to normal. 2022, and it started that way, but somewhere around the middle of the year, like you saw what happened, like a lot of companies started letting go of people, especially because of this reason, what I believe. So yeah, right now I think Japanese companies are a little bit different in that aspect. They are slowly always making those decisions, how to change their hiring plans, not to hire too aggressively, just continuously, and always increasing their requirements, always having higher requirements, and being more conservative also from the salary aspect as well, and we can touch that base.
For sure. Yeah, it's funny that you bring that up too, because I have heard like in the past that Japan is oftentimes seen as being very slow to adapt, to change, and it's funny because I think a lot of times it gets painted as a very like in a negative light. But I do think that it's times like this where you see the value of really establishing that stable foundation and then building from there and being a bit more conservative with cash flow and so forth.
Mm.
One thing that we didn't cover and I kind of wanted to do at the top, but it ties well into the next section. And so I want to go into the open positions that you guys are currently working on, and what positions you saw open up towards the end, and then kind of what positions you're looking for in 2023. But before we do that, I wanted to ask you, what are some of the biggest positions that your team covers now? And maybe if you can just go through, like you mentioned, obviously back end being that main thing, but if you can just break down what the technical team here at Wahl+Case does.
Sure. So yes, of course. I would say like the biggest one is backend. Like a lot of there are more candidates on the market that we can find, but there are positions like data related, like data engineers, then data analysis, data scientists, machine learning engineers. Then we have infrastructure, DevOps, SRE candidates. We have product managers, project managers, engineering managers, more manager positions, and of course CTO positions. So these are the ones that we are covering, and I think kind of like I prioritize them in the order of the amount of candidates that we are having.
The volume.
Yeah.
That's great. And so, and as far as like industries, are there particular industries that you guys specialize in, or is it pretty broad?
No, not really. Like we are working as I mentioned, like those industries like payment industries, gaming, e-commerce, AI. A lot of AI companies are actually bringing people from abroad because there are not many candidates for that on the market. So that's a good, if someone is thinking of like which area to go to, I would suggest AI, because that's definitely a future for the next years to come.
Great. Okay. Cool. And that segues well into. So what positions have you seen? What, I guess there's two kind of sides to this question. Would have been the kind of the highlights and then potentially like the lowlights for this last year, and then what do you see as those being in 2023?
In terms of like the position?
Yeah, in terms of the position specifically. So like, was there a big influx in any position, a big like, drop?
I've seen more and more data science and machine learning positions opening because the companies are growing, and with more data, they need to create more models to predict more things about their businesses. So that's the area that's growing, and I believe it's gonna like explode in the coming years as the companies are growing, especially the Japanese companies.
Nice. And so, kind of conversely, what are some of the positions that maybe you've seen fade out or that used to be kind of in vogue and have sort of lost some of their luster?
I wouldn't say fade out, but it's becoming very common to be like front end, back end, or full stack engineer, right? You are not being that different. So you want something that differentiates you, right? Being like a back end with a strong infrastructure experience is better than just being like a back end engineer or full stack. Yeah, so you want to expand your skills. You always want to work on those. And yeah, as an engineer, I think that's quite a challenging part.
So this is maybe a specific question. Honestly, again, I don't know that this is something that you can say definitely one way or the other, but
let's give it a try.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, do you feel like it kind of sounds like what you're describing is really specializing in something is potentially better than being more of a generalist when it comes to your engineering skill set?
I would say so. I would say, of course, you want to be the best in something, because you will always be able to find a job, right? If you're a generalist, you are like a bunch of other people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. And so, are there any specific positions that you've seen that you think will? You mentioned AI, machine learning, data. Are there any other positions that you feel have the potential to really grow in 2023 that maybe have been slower in the past?
That's a tough one. But what I've seen recently, there are a lot of agile coaches coming on the market. A lot of project managers are getting certified for becoming agile coach. Some engineers as well. The Scrum is becoming very popular agile methodology. So I think that will become very popular in upcoming years. But in 2023, I don't think so, because it's not that crucial at this point. Yeah.
Super interesting. And so when you say agile coach, does that mean that are not so popular now, are not so crucial now. Does that mean that most companies are operating in sort of a waterfall method, or is there?
There are some companies that are doing like waterfall. There are still companies that are doing agile. What I think agile coach more on an organizational level rather than just technical teams. Yeah, and specifically candidates who are really good at it, they don't speak Japanese. So it's really hard for them to infiltrate into the bigger organizations, Japanese companies, to help them change the environment.
That's great. And so potentially down the line, if you do develop that skill set and having a Japanese language basis, then in like 2 years.
Yeah, definitely opens up a lot of doors.
That's
definitely.
great. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's a pretty unique skill set, and it's like kind of a good tip. If you are looking to come to Japan, definitely something you should be focusing on. Agile coaching, Japanese language, find a job pretty quickly. And that brings us to salary ranges. Something you kind of alluded to previously with inflation being what it is in America and kind of the salaries being pretty stable in Japan. What have you seen as far as those salary ranges in 2022, and then what do you see them as being in 2023?
Well, first of all, like the salaries compared to like Western countries, I want everyone to be aware of this. Like Japan is lacking behind, especially in the tech sector, right? So, but having that said, they've been stable. Like they haven't been changing for past 4 years that I've been here. Maybe slightly increased. So if I am supposed to like give ranges here to kind of like explain people what I'm seeing on the market, I will just put like in terms of years of experience, although I personally do not believe in that because everyone is different individually, everybody progresses differently. But let's say from 0 to 3 years of experience, the salary ranges for back-end engineers, let's put them, talk about them, is 4 to 6 million yen. It's something that you can expect on an average. For someone like between 3 to 6, 7 years of experience, they can go from like 6 to 9, maybe even 10 million yen, and everything above, like those are considered very senior engineers, even staff level engineers could go above 10 million yen. However, right now, market is in that way that there are not many companies that can pay big money, right, on to the candidates. So what those senior candidates can expect is maybe around up to 12 and around 12 on the max. And companies are becoming very conservative. That's what I mentioned, like becoming very conservative. There are a lot of layoffs happening. There are a little bit more candidates on the market, very good candidates that are willing to take the pay cuts to get a job and to stay in Japan. And I'm talking more about the multilingual candidates. Yeah.
What would you say to someone who has been considering moving to Japan and then understanding that they are potentially going to have this gap between what they were making in the States or globally compared to what they are making here? What are maybe some of the benefits that you would highlight to people about working in this market versus working somewhere else?
This is a complicated question.
I know it's also like really personal. Like it could be case by
exactly.
case
It goes case by case, but let's just take an example. If a person who wants to come to Japan is like a single person, it's not married, so the only cost that person has is his living costs, right? He has no debts outside of Japan. That's the ideal situation, and that person can actually live in Japan with 5-6 million yen. I'm not gonna say like casually, comfortably, but it's gonna be okay, no problems at all. What benefits they can expect? It's amazing country, first of all. Japan is really amazing country. People are really polite. It's clean. There are great trains, great way of transportation. You can go everywhere, like on the mountain, on the beach, like everything in like 1 hour. So that's what you can expect. But the prices of apartments are really high. So you have to include that. So when you are deciding to come to Japan, you have to seriously do the research about the prices of apartments, the food, because the food is also very expensive, I would say, compared to my country. Like,
Oh, really?
Yeah. For example, the fruits and vegetables in my country are really cheap compared to Japan.
Fruit is just, yeah, that's like the biggest.
Yeah,
The fruit, yeah, that's everything is expensive in San Francisco except for the fruit when you compare it to Japan. Yeah.
definitely. So you want to do the calculation of all of those things, and you want to also include the prices of the places you want to visit. You know, you're outside of like work life, personal life. So I think those are the things that people should be doing before thinking about coming to Japan. Do the research, do the market mapping and everything. Understand the market, understand the prices, understand the salaries, and then you will know if you actually want to come here or not.
That's great. That's great. And then as far as the salary ranges that you've seen over the past 4 years, you mentioned that you have seen them increase a little bit, maybe nothing too drastic. Do you see that trend continuing this year? Like, do you see a slight increase, or do you think things will be pretty stable and you don't want to get anyone's hopes up?
Yeah, I believe it's gonna be pretty stable with a slight increase, like everything else in Japan. Like everything is like slowly going forward, and that's what I like about Japan. Kind of like you know what to expect from it.
I agree. Yeah, that's. I think the trains is like an understated, just beautiful thing. Like, just took the subway in New York, and it's like kind of intimidating. And then in the year, it's like I do it every day, and I don't even think about it. Okay, moving on. I want to talk about the working culture and just how things have changed since you've been in Japan in the last year, also, and then moving into 2023. Obviously, during the pandemic, there was kind of that hard shift to remote working, forced shift to remote working. What were you seeing for technical people in 2022?
Well, from the people's perspective, I still see that people are interested in staying remote first, if possible. But a lot of them are also like moving towards hybrid. At least people became like nostalgic. They want to meet other people. They want to socialize, regardless of how unsocial they might be. Yeah, and companies are actually moving towards hybrid more, like 2, maybe even 3 times a week. Like a lot of companies are doing that, and there are still companies who are like remote work first. But I'm seeing that they will change as well in the future as the pandemic is like getting to an end. That's gonna shift like almost 100%.
It is funny because I see a lot of like, it's almost like be careful what you wish for. Like I feel like before the pandemic, everyone was like, I need to be remote, I want to work from anywhere, I want to work from home. And I do think there is advantages, but I've seen from my experience that a lot of like the younger workforce is more interested in actually having that environment where they can come in and have like a hub where they're communicating with their coworkers, learning from their coworkers, interacting socially with their coworkers versus I think before when we were always in the office, it was always like, oh, like I want to be not here. And now everyone's like, oh, I want to be there. Yeah, so it's interesting to see, and so yeah, I think that hybrid has been a great trend for a lot of companies. Do you see any companies really kind of all going completely in office? Like, I know even for engineers, I feel like before the pandemic even was pretty flexible for the most part. Do you see anyone saying like now everyone has to be in the office?
Oh yeah, of course. There are companies, I'm not gonna
Yeah,
name them. Some people know that already, those companies. But there are.
You can message Uros on LinkedIn if you want the specific company.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah, there are definitely companies who are 100% from the office, and it's kind of like making people inside of the company feeling anxious about it. Yeah, so a lot of people are trying to change the companies because of that. Yeah.
Great. Cool. And so just to kind of close out, I wanted to give you maybe an opportunity to talk about some of the positions that you're working on currently, and just let our audience know, like if there is any like highlights, like specific hot jobs you want to mention now.
Well, I'm not gonna talk about any specific position,
Okay.
but I'm gonna say like if you're an engineer, like as I mentioned, like backend engineer, if you're a data scientist, data engineer, data related positions, machine learning, product manager, project manager, anything, practically any technical position, regardless of what language you speak, please feel free to contact me.
Awesome. And do you want to give them maybe like best ways to reach you?
Yeah.
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn is awesome. My email is uros@wahl+case.com. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Uros.
Thank you.
I will also post a link to his LinkedIn in the description on Twitch and on YouTube. Thank you all for tuning in for our second stream. We're going to be doing this more and hopefully weekly. Next week on Wednesday at 3 p.m., we're going to be having a new show called Decoding the JD with Dell. And we're going to specifically be talking about a machine learning engineering position that he's working on and giving you the details about what that JD looks like and how to read the JD and interpret it in a way that makes sense for your career, and then potentially how to format your CV, resume, application to be matching what they're looking for this position. So tune in again next week at 3 p.m. We appreciate you. As always, I'm Brian from Wahl+Case. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you, Uros.
Thank you.